The grocery store on Rideau Street smelled like fresh bread and floor cleaner. And on a Tuesday afternoon in late November, most people moved through it quickly. Heads down, carts full, minds somewhere else entirely. Nobody noticed the woman in aisle 7 who had been standing in front of the canned soup section for almost 4 minutes, doing math in her head that wasn't adding up. Her name was Claire Beaumont, and she was 38 years old, and she was trying to figure out whether she could afford both the lentil soup and the pasta sauce, or just one or neither. She picked up the soup, picked it up again. Her daughter, Ivy, was 7 years old and sitting in the front basket of the cart with her boots dangling over the edge, holding a small stuffed rabbit named Gerald that she brought everywhere. Ivy had noticed her mother standing still for too long, the way children notice everything adults try to hide. "Mama," Ivy said quietly, "are we getting the soup? We're thinking about it, baby." "Gerald likes soup," Claire smiled even though her chest hurt. "Gerald has good taste." She put the soup in the cart. She would figure out the rest later. She always figured out the rest later. That was the rhythm of her life now. Ever since Kevin left 10 months ago and took his income with him, leaving Claire with a half-paid mortgage on a house in Ottawa she could no longer afford. A 7-year-old who asked too few questions because she somehow already understood, and a part-time job at a print shop that paid just enough to make the gap between surviving and drowning feel personal. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She had stopped doing that somewhere around month 4, when the savings account hit 0, and she realized that shame was a luxury she couldn't afford either. She just kept moving. Soup in the cart. Bread on sale. Ground beef if the date was close enough to get the discount sticker. The checkout line on a Tuesday afternoon was quiet. Only 2 registers open. Claire chose the one on the left because the cashier there, a young woman with a red streak in her hair and headphones around her neck, had once smiled at Ivy without being asked to, and that kind of thing stayed with you. Claire unloaded the cart carefully. Lentil soup, pasta, frozen peas, a small block of cheddar, bread, 2 apples, a coloring book from the discount bin. $1.99. Because Ivy had been so good, so uncomplaining, so heartbreakingly easy about everything lately. And Claire could not let that go entirely unrewarded. The cashier scanned each item without looking up. The total climbed on the small screen at the end of the belt. Claire watched it the way you watch something you're hoping will stop before it reaches a certain point. It didn't stop. $43.12. Claire opened her wallet. She had 2 20s and some change. She had been so careful this week. Had checked the flyers, had planned the meals, had written the list twice. And she had still miscalculated somewhere. And now the difference between what she had and what she owed was $3.12. And the line behind her had 3 people in it, and Ivy was watching her with those quiet, knowing eyes, and Claire felt the heat crawl up the back of her neck in a way she recognized too well. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I think I miscounted. Can I put something back?" The cashier, her name tag said Brianna, had already stopped smiling. Not unkindly, just efficiently. "Sure. What do you want to remove?" Claire reached for the coloring book first, because that was the right answer, that was the obvious answer, that was the answer a responsible adult made without hesitation. Ivy didn't say anything. She just tucked Gerald a little closer to her chest. That small movement, just a rabbit pulled an inch tighter, undid something in Claire's throat that she had been holding together for a long time. She put the coloring book on the counter to the side. "That one," she said. "And the cheese, I think?" The cheese was $4.89. That would cover it. She hated cheese now, abstractly, as a concept. The man behind her in line was maybe 45, wearing a City Works jacket and steel-toed boots, holding a single basket with a sub-sandwich and a bottle of Gatorade. He had the look of someone who worked outside, and had stopped being cold about it years ago. His name was Patrick Ouellette, and he had lived in Ottawa his whole life. And he had a daughter of his own. 12 now, practically a teenager, already embarrassed to be seen with him in public, which he pretended not to mind more than he did. He watched Claire put the coloring book aside. He watched Ivy hug the rabbit. He didn't make a show of it. He didn't say anything loud or gesture for anyone to notice. He just reached past Claire, "Sorry, excuse me," and set his basket on the belt, then turned to Brianna and said quietly, "Can you add whatever's short to mine?" Claire turned around fast. "No, please, you don't have to. I know I don't have to," he said it simply. Not like a performance, like a fact. $3, right? Less than my Gatorade. I can't let you do that. Patrick looked at her directly, not unkindly. "You're not letting me. I'm doing it." Brianna had already started processing. The total adjusted. The line moved forward. Claire stood there for a moment with the coloring book still in her hand, not sure what to do with it, not sure what to do with herself. Her eyes were stinging in that particular way she hated. The way that happened when someone was unexpectedly decent to her, and her body didn't know how to handle it anymore. Ivy looked up at the man in the city works jacket with complete seriousness. "Thank you," she said. "Gerald says thank you too." Patrick blinked, then he smiled. A real one, the kind that reached the corners of his eyes. "Tell Gerald he's very welcome." Brianna put the coloring book back in the bag without comment, and the cheddar too, and Claire paid her $40, and stood at the end of the belt, and did not cry, which she was quietly proud of. She waited while Patrick paid for his sandwich and his Gatorade, and the $3.12 that had almost broken her Tuesday. When he picked up his bag and turned to leave, she stepped in front of him. I want to say thank you, properly." He shrugged with one shoulder. "Forget it. I can't forget it." She meant that literally. She had learned that the small indignities stayed with you, the moments where a stranger looked through you like glass. But so did the other ones. The moments where someone saw you. "Can I ask why? You don't know me." Patrick was quiet for a second. He shifted his bag to the other hand. Outside the big windows at the front of the store, the sky had gone the particular flat gray of an Ottawa November afternoon, the kind that's settled in and stayed until April. "My wife left 6 years ago," he said finally. We're not getting into all of it. But I had my daughter on my own for a while, and there was a morning at a Tim Hortons where I was short change for a coffee, and I had her with me. She was maybe 6, and the woman behind me covered it. Didn't make a thing of it. Just did it." He paused. "I think about that still. Some stranger's 12-year-old daughter is why I got through that morning." Claire nodded slowly. She understood that. The way a small thing becomes load-bearing without anyone intending it to. "What's her name?" she asked. "Your daughter." Something shifted in his expression. The good kind of shift, the kind that happened when someone asked about the thing you were most proud of. "Adeline, Addie. She's 12 now and thinks I'm embarrassing, so that's going well." Claire laughed. An actual laugh, surprised out of her. "Mine's Ivy. She's 7 and believes her stuffed rabbit has opinions." "He clearly does," Patrick said, nodding at Gerald with complete seriousness. Ivy beamed. They stood in the vestibule of the grocery store between the automatic doors, the cold air coming in from outside in pulses. Neither of them moving toward the parking lot quite yet. It wasn't awkward. It was something rarer than that. The particular ease of two people who had both been through something, and didn't need to explain the shape of it to each other. Patrick worked for the city of Ottawa. Roads and infrastructure. Been there 11 years. He lived in Gloucester, not far. He did not try to give Claire his number or make the moment into something it wasn't. He just talked to her like a person, which was what she had needed without knowing she needed it. Before they finally went their separate ways, she toward the bus stop on the corner, he toward the parking lot. He did say one more thing. "There's a community resource thing I only know about because Addie's school sent it home last year. For single parents. They do grocery assistance, help with utilities sometimes, I think some kind of tutoring for kids." He got out his phone and texted her the link before she could say anything about not having time to look into it. "You don't have to use it, but it's there." Claire looked at her phone. The name of the organization was just text on a screen, but something about seeing it made the weight behind her sternum loosen, just slightly, the way a window being opened changes the air in a room. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it. Pass it forward someday," he said, and walked to his car, and that was that. On the bus home, Ivy sat beside Claire with Gerald on her lap, and the coloring book tucked under her arm, and she leaned her head against Claire's sleeve without saying anything. And Claire put her arm around her daughter and looked out the window at the gray November city going past, and let herself feel, just for a moment, like maybe things were going to be okay, not fixed, not resolved, but okay. The resource Patrick had texted her turned out to be real. Claire looked it up that night after Ivy was asleep, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, the way she did most of her administrative crying. Quietly, after everyone else was down. The organization was called Roots and Reach, and they operated out of a community center in Centertown. And they did exactly what Patrick had said. Grocery support, utility help, after-school programs. The woman who answered when Claire called the next morning sounded like someone who had made this call herself once. They got her set up within 2 weeks. Not charity. That word sat wrong with Claire in a way she had started to examine, rather than just react to. It was a support network, a thing built by people who understood that the gap between managing and not managing was sometimes just $3.12, and whether a stranger in line happened to notice. She started volunteering on Saturday mornings, 6 months later, when her hours at the print shop had stabilized. And Ivy had started a program at the center, and would come along and do crafts in the next room, while Claire sorted food bank donations and talked to other people in lines they hadn't expected to be in. She was not their savior. She was just someone who had been there, who knew what it felt like to put a coloring book back, who could sit across a table and not make someone explain themselves from scratch. Ivy eventually wore out 2 more copies of that coloring book. She still has Gerald, though one of his ears has been repaired with mismatched thread, and his expression has developed the particular serenity of a stuffed animal who has seen things. Claire still thinks about Patrick Ouellette sometimes, about the way he reached past her without making a spectacle of it, without needing her to be grateful in any particular way. She never ran into him again, which was fine. Some things don't need a sequel. What she thinks about most, on the Saturday mornings when she's at Roots and Reach and someone comes through the door for the first time, looking like they've been practicing how to seem smaller than they are. The particular posture of someone who is ashamed of needing something, is that he had no idea. Patrick had no idea what that Tuesday was or what it cost her to stand at that checkout counter. He just paid attention. He just acted. That's the whole thing. That's all it ever is. The woman who covered a stranger's coffee at a Tim Hortons didn't know she was keeping a father upright long enough for his daughter to grow up. Patrick didn't know he was opening a door that Claire would eventually prop open for other people. Claire doesn't know, most of the time, what the ripple looks like from the people she sat across from on